This is 99.9 The Wave. This is Randy Heisel. We have a special guest in the studio this afternoon. This Chaplain Colonel Pinkie Fischer. How are you, Pinkie?
I am doing well. Thank you.
Good. We're really happy to have you in the studio. We've got, I can't believe your resume. I'm just going to read some of it, and you just tell me if it's all accurate, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. But Chaplain Colonel Pinkie Fischer, a Brooklyn, New York native, has served in the U.S. Army since 2000, entering active duty in 2005. She holds multiple degrees, including a Doctor of Ministry, and is ordained with the Assemblies of God and Rhema Ministerial Association International. She currently serves as the command chaplain for the 8th Theater Sustainment Command at Fort Shafter, Hawaii. Her extensive military career includes assignments with the 82nd Airborne Division, Special Operations Command, West Point, and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. She has deployed 7 times, supporting operations in Iraq, Afghanistan, Africa, and during the Russia-Ukraine crisis. Notably, she was the last chaplain to evacuate Afghanistan during the 2021 withdrawal. Chaplain Fischer has completed rigorous military training, including Airborne, Jump Master, Pathfinder, and the Command and General Staff College. She has been selected to attend the U.S. Army War College in 2025. Congratulations. Her awards include the Defense Superior Service Medal, Bronze Star, Combat Action Badge, and multiple commendations, along with international honors from Germany and Chile. Does that about cover it?
That does.
All right. That's awesome. Well, it's good to have you in the studio once again. And I know that you are somewhat associated or friends with Chaplain Klein. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Chaplain Klein is our chaplain here on the island. And where did you guys meet and work together?
So we were both assigned to the 82nd Airborne Division. I was a battalion chaplain at the time, and he was the deputy division chaplain. And so when the 82nd deployed in 2007, he was just coming on board in processing. So he had to quickly in process and then follow and catch up with the 82nd, who was already en route to Afghanistan.
Oh, that's awesome. You're not going to tell us any stories about him then, I guess.
Probably not for this audience, but yes, offline we can talk about.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good. You were the first female division chaplain for the 82nd Airborne. Was that a goal of yours to do that? Did it just happen, or?
You know, I think that every chaplain who serves in 82nd, whether they're a battalion or a brigade chaplain, they want to one day aspire to be the division chaplain for the 82nd. It's such an honorable position and historic position because it's a part of a historic division. But it's just a dream. And at least I would think that all of us had at least one time had a dream. For me, I also had a dream, but I never pursued it. I never saw that actually coming to reality because they've never had a female chaplain. So I didn't think that I would even be considered.
So you were the first female chaplain?
I was. After I was selected, the chief of chaplains at that time, he called me and he said that you got this position because of your paper. He said, you earned this. When it was compared to others, he said, you got this. And he emphasized that I earned it. And as he was talking, that's when I started to cry because I thought to myself, wow, this dream is now becoming a reality. This is actually coming to fruition. Wow,
that's a great story. So did you experience any challenges in that role that you want to talk about?
It was that same year that the 82nd was deployed to Afghanistan.
Oh, okay.
During the withdrawal.
Wow.
And then when we returned, we had the COVID-19 mandate. So for all government employees, so we had to support those executive orders. And then immediately following that, we had to deploy to Poland to reinforce the Polish border just in time before Putin invaded Ukraine. So that was a back-to-back-to-back, 3 various different events that took place just in that first year.
Wow, so that was not a cakewalk. That wasn't
No,
wow.
Not at all.
That's awesome. So you were the first female division chaplain for the 82nd Airborne. Wow. You were with Major General Donahue and the 82nd Airborne during the Afghanistan withdrawal. What were your biggest takeaways from that experience?
He's a phenomenal leader, and he brought the right temperament and just the type of leadership that we needed in the midst of one of the most chaotic deployments we've ever experienced. So this was not his first rodeo going over to Afghanistan. And for that matter, many of us officers and senior NCOs, non-commissioned officers, they also have been to Afghanistan, and they've lost some personal battle buddies over that 20-year period. So you had that dynamic of individuals that, just like General Donahue, who's been there and done that, and then you had new soldiers, first-time deployers. So by him bringing that experience, he knew the individuals that he was working with. He knew the Taliban leadership. That he brought to the table, and that really helped us day by day get through what we needed to in order to accomplish the mission.
Wow, that's great. So your name is Pinkie. Is that your real name, or how did you come up with, how did that name come about?
It's a nickname.
Okay.
At least it started off as, and now it's an official military name that's in my records.
Okay, so it's not on your birth certificate.
It's not on my birth certificate.
Okay.
But it was close. And I say close because I am the youngest child, and I'm the only girl. I have two older brothers. My parents wanted a daughter. They wanted a girl, and so they prayed. And when I finally came, I guess because they were just so filled with joy, they overdid it with the color pink. And when I say overdid it, I can't express enough that I came home, they brought me home, I had a pink bedroom, pink walls, pink carpet, pink crib, pink furniture. All my clothes were pink. Yes. It probably looked cute back then in the 70s, but yeah.
Yeah, a lot of things. Shag carpet,
Yes.
A lot of that stuff.
And I had the pink shag carpet.
Oh, okay.
I sure did.
So that's how you got the nickname?
That's how
Okay.
it stuck.
Okay.
It stuck. It came about from a fellow student in elementary school. During our recess period, it was a little boy who looked at me. I had a really nice looking jumpsuit, which was all pink.
Okay.
And I had pink sneakers. And they were all the same shade. And I thought I was looking good. And I probably was. But when that little boy looked at me and he said, "You look like a bottle of Pepto-Bismol." And from that point on, the name Pinkie stuck.
Right.
And then, other classroom kids called me Pinkie. The teachers started to call me Pinkie. It just stuck. And I was never able to shake it off, even when I came into the military.
That's a great story. So can you tell me a little bit about Pinkie's kids and your role in caring for them during the final weeks in Afghanistan?
Yes, that was just a little nickname that some of the soldiers had gave me. But it really was as a result of my arrival to Afghanistan. I went to the hospital to kind of get some situational awareness of what was going on. And that was exactly the same day that, if you remember, we had some Afghan civilians that fell off of the aircraft. They were trying to evacuate. So I landed later that day. And so by going to visit the hospital, I wanted to kind of see how the leadership was doing there and to kind of get a better understanding of what happened. I was met by the hospital commander, and he introduced me to his staff, and then he took me into a back room, and there was some of his staff holding about 5 children. 3 were, I would say, probably between the ages of 4 to 8. And then 2 of the children were babies. They were still in diapers. And he had staff in there, and he said, "This is the situation that I'm in. These children were brought to us from the gates with no accompanying parent, no guardian. We treated them, make sure they were okay, but we don't have anybody to turn them over to. So now we're starting to collect children, and we have to take care of them until we get further guidance. And so now he's noticing that his staff is part nursing and medical personnel, part nursery. And so he said, Pinkie, I need your help. He said, can you help me with the situation? Because I need my staff in the emergency room, in the operating room, and just on standby for whatever the case is.
Yeah.
And that was the same day that we stood up a makeshift orphanage.
So tell me a little bit more about Pinkie's kids. Like, how did those kids end up in your care? How did that come about?
Well, that's a good question. So we receive children from various ways. The Marines primarily, they man the gates. And so there were families who actually gave their children to the Marines, especially if they knew that they were not going to meet the qualifications in order to come through the gate. And that was a very difficult decision, to see a mother and father choose which child they're going to give. And they did that on their own, but they would hand their children over. So that was one way. Once that Marine accepted that child, and they would turn them over to us, and they would take them to the hospital first, get them checked, and then they would come to us. Another way is for those that were desperate. There were families, primarily fathers, that would throw their children over the wall. Now, if you remember maybe some of the video of those high Texas barrier type walls that they had, and then on top of that were concertina wire. And they would throw their children, typically babies, the ones that were lighter, they would throw them over the wall, hoping that somebody would be on the other side to catch them. There were times that we did catch them, and then there were times that we didn't, because we had no heads up. We didn't know. And those Marines, this is not something that they're taught. But as soon as they were able to catch children or find them, they would immediately take them to the hospital, get them checked, and then they would bring them over to our orphanage. Another way is when, because of the chaoticness of at the gate, sometimes children were taken away from their parents because of the crowds, okay? Not on purpose, but it's the crowds are pushing you one way and you're holding on to your child's hand, and then the child slips away. And so children would come to us because they came through, but they were separated. So we would take them and we would work with some of the Army units and Marines to reconnect with their families. And then there were children that the parents were encouraging some of the younger ones, and I would say probably between 12 to 17, who can find a hole under the Texas barrier or in some crevice, and if you can sneak onto the airfield, run toward the aircraft, and that would be the guidance they would give them. And again, they would go ahead and basically disown the child and say their goodbyes and hoping and wishing them the best. So those are the different types of ways that we would receive children. And that's why the range of 7 days old, literally just born, to those that were older, that were young adults. But I want to share a story with you that I think would be pretty impressive. And to me, it's a story that really has changed my life. And that is those babies. If you think about it, the 82nd Airborne Division, we don't deploy with pacifiers and baby bottles and formula and diapers. We don't do that. Regardless of what maybe the public may think, sorry, we're not equipped to do that. And I don't think any unit does. And so here are children that are literally babies coming to us. How do we take care of them? This, and I'm going to have to give God the glory for this, because there was a lieutenant colonel at the time, and she had just gave birth. So when any of our female soldiers have just given birth, they have a time period where they have a waiver that they cannot deploy so that they can be home to take care of their child. At that time, we were getting our orders to deploy. So she requested that she would receive a waiver so that she can deploy because she felt she needed to be on this deployment. She talked to her husband. Her husband was in agreement, and he said, you truly believe that you need to be in Afghanistan on this deployment, then I support you. And so the paperwork was approved, and she deployed. She also brought with her equipment and supplies that she needed because she was still milking. And she would go ahead and pump milk from her breast, and then she would just pour it out. When she found out about my makeshift orphanage, and I was briefing every day about the ages of the children, she came to me after the briefing and she said, could you use my milk, my breast milk? I did not know that she was pumping. And I said, oh my goodness, yes, because babies don't like MREs. And it's just not working. And we didn't know what else to do. I mean, we tried to give the children what we had, but you're talking about babies. And so she provided milk, and she would take empty bottles, water bottles that we had laying around, and she would pour the milk into the bottles. And then I would take about 5 or 6 bottles a day and take it to the hospital, give it to the nurses. The nurses were already in cahoots with what we were doing. They would label the bottles breast milk, and we have pictures of this, where they would label it breast milk so that the doctors didn't think it was formula or creamer for the coffee. And so they wanted to make sure the day and night shift knew exactly what this was, and that's how we were able to sustain the babies that were coming in.
Wow, that's a powerful, powerful story.
So that lieutenant colonel, she ended up saving at least 50 babies, kept them alive by her breast milk. And the doctors confirmed that when they fed the babies her breast milk, they started to bounce back, because many times when we received the children, they were already very dehydrated, very malnourished. And so, because they haven't eaten in days. And maybe the mom that was on the other side of the gate, she was already malnourished, dehydrated herself. So she was not pouring in any nutrients to the children. So when they had gave the milk to the babies, they said in a 24-hour period, they started to see bounce back in those children. And it stabilized the kids so that we can go ahead and fly them out, usually that night. So that was a blessing, that she was there to provide nutrients in her milk to give to the children.
Wow.
Yeah. That's why she deployed. I believe it. She believes it too. When she was adamant about, I need to be on this deployment.
Again, that's just a very powerful story. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you.
So you were involved in the evacuation in Afghanistan, correct?
That's
You were
correct.
there kind of in the last days.
That's correct.
Can
I
you-
was there from the basically almost the entire month of August, but starting around the 12th
Yeah,
of August.
that must have been chaotic. Can you share any stories about that?
Yes, it was. We flew into a very hostile but very chaotic period, and a lot of it Americans were watching on TV just like we were. We were watching how it was more structured and disciplined, and it just started to fall apart so quickly. And that's when we were on call to fly to Afghanistan to try to bring order and discipline, but then start a structure of how to evacuate. And in the military, we call it non-combatant evacuation operations. So in conjunction with the Department of State, we were working with U.S. personnel, and that included those that were living there, teachers, those that were working with coalition forces, anybody who was a U.S. citizen. They were our priority. And then those Afghan civilians who worked and supported not just U.S., but coalition forces over the years. So we were looking at their credentials and seeing how we can also move them. So that was, I think when it really started to hit the news is that video of people falling off the aircraft because so many people were so anxious. They wanted to get out of Afghanistan by any means necessary. And it unfortunately cost some lives on that day, and that was the day that I had arrived. And so by that evening, our military went ahead and regained command and control, and then we started to man the gates properly and start to vet people as they were coming through. But then that's when you start to see the number of crowds at each of the gates increase more and more because of anxiety, because of stress, and realizing that we may be running out of time. And so it just went from non-combatant evacuation operation to a humanitarian crisis. And it seemed like it happened overnight.
Yeah, I mean, we all saw it on TV here, but imagine being there must have been as well. Thank you for your service. If I haven't told you that already,
Thank you.
Obviously, having you all there saved probably a lot of people. So.
Thank you. Yes, I hope it did.
So on a lighter note, so what brings you to Kwajalein?
Kwajalein, I came here because Chaplain Mike Klein, he invited me to be a guest speaker at the Kwajalein National Prayer Breakfast that he was hosting. And so that brought me here and to be a guest speaker and to speak to those that wanted to attend. You know, this is a great time for me to be here. Not just to visit him, but just to visit my own soldiers that are here supporting the mission here, and just to support everybody else here too.
Awesome. So how do you like Kwajalein so far? What's your impression?
Small. Very small.
Not your typical military base, right?
No, not at all. This is one of those bases where you almost feel like you can stand on one end of the island and throw a rock at the other end and hit.
You can do that, actually.
Hit the other side.
Yeah.
If you have a good arm, I think you can. I think you can.
Any advice that you give to young women considering a career in the Army and the chaplaincy?
Yeah, the Army is such a great profession to be a part of. And the Army itself is, we grow our leaders. But we're also a team of teams, okay? We are the largest military force in the United States of America. So we have to do that. We have to look at how we can develop team leaders, commanders, those that are not afraid to make decisions. And so when I am talking to women as young as high school, and I'm talking, in different other locations, and I'm trying to encourage, you may want to look at pursuing a career within the United States Army because of the many branches we have. But I tell them, be prepared to grow and learn. Be prepared to be challenged to become better than what you are. This is not a cakewalk, because as the United States Army, our job is to fight and win our nation's wars. But we are looking for individuals that are willing to bring their gifts and talents to the table. And that's what I'm so impressed about the United States Army, is that I can bring who I am and bring my gifts and talents and then add it to the table to be a part of the greater team. And then I would always encourage them to be prepared to be a leader, because we're all about growing leaders, okay? And we want the best. So be prepared to learn, grow, and then become that leader so that we can remain the best.
Well, you're a fine example of that. Based on your resume, it looks like you've been very successful, and you've given a lot to the Army.
Thank you. Thank you.
So what's next for you after you leave here and head back to Hawaii? What does Pinkie's future look like?
Well, I'm serving in the great state of Hawaii, right there at Fort Shafter. I am the command chaplain for the 8th Theater Sustainment Command. So I will go back and I will continue to serve my team and be a part of a great team. And then I'm going to transition this summer. because I got selected to go to the United States Army War College. So I'm looking forward to that
Congratulations.
experience.
That's
Thank
awesome.
You.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you.
tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, that is a selection process. And for the Chaplain Corps, we only have just a couple of slots just for that particular school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So what an honor to be selected to go to that school. But I will be in a class with many other future leaders, and most likely they're going to be general officers. So that is a school that is going to teach and prepare you for the strategic.
Well, that's just awesome. Sounds like a good time. Sounds like you got a bright future ahead of you.
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to learning from the teachers, but also learning from my fellow students too.
Wow. Well, it's been a real honor having you in the studio this afternoon, Pinkie. And wow, you just was a great story. I enjoyed it very much. And when we get off the air, we can talk about Mike and all the stories that you can't tell me on the air. So
That sounds good.
all right, Pinkie. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.